November 18th meeting of the Budget and Audit Committee for the City of Jackson. The first item we have here is the approval of the minutes. We'll move that on to the next month. And we'll go ahead and move into item 3, our information. We're going to strike item B. That's a leftover from last month's agenda that I failed to remove. But we'll go ahead and have our revenue report from Mr. Arnold. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Just a quick update on the couple of revenue accounts that we've been reporting on each month. First off, it's still early in the property tax season. However, we're off to a good start. We've had a really good couple of weeks, and I would caution you about, putting too much into these weekly numbers, because depending on who's paying their taxes now and who's paying them later, you can get some pretty large fluctuations. But the last report indicates that compared to this same week last year, we're about $1.7 million ahead on property tax collections at this point. Of course, last year, COVID, going a lot of variables, and like I said, you can have one of these large mortgage companies submit a remittance and impact these numbers pretty significantly. But we're off to a good start.
Okay. And we were, Bobby, if I remember, we were down from 2019 week to week this time last year until kind of things started opening back up, people more comfortable.
Right. So
we're probably back up to normal process.
That's right. So I think we're off to a good start, and things seem to be going pretty smoothly right now in the revenue office, which is a good thing. Sales tax, of course, November's sales tax payment is pending, like later this week, early next week. I'm not sure if the holidays are going to impact that or not, but through the month of October, we continue very strong sales tax numbers. Local sales tax, we're up 12.4% through October for the same period the prior year. And the last numbers I saw on the state shared sales tax, that positive variance was even larger than the local. So
That's excellent news.
right, and Lori and I were just talking about the hotel tax numbers.
Lori, would you share that with us, kind of what you're seeing?
Yes, we have just received the September numbers, and we are up over last year 28%. For the year to date, we are up nearly 50% over 2020.
Do you have an idea of the comparison at 19?
I think that's about 28% over 2019, and 2019 was a record-setting year for us. So
we're on pace for record-setting this year.
Yes, we've almost already hit that. So
now, while we've got you here, how do you see that? What do you think's impacting that? You think that's additional rooms that are coming online? How are we over where we were in 2019?
yeah, I would say two things. One is that we do have an additional, not many communities opened a hotel during COVID. We did. So that's additional rooms that are on board of a national brand. So that's getting followed through. I'd also say with COVID, it was, although it impacted us health-wise, it did not impact a lot of folks traveling. And so there's a pent-up demand financially for traveling. And so people are more apt to travel. And Jackson is positioned well as a good market, as a mid-market as compared to your larger communities. So we were more attractive in that way. And I continue to see that will continue to impact us. I think we have to be concerned with inflation and how, if people start holding back on their spending. As of right now, we're not seeing that. And that is happening across the state with our counterparts as well. Okay. So it is a record-setting year for Tennessee tourism overall. Okay. We are leading the pack, though. I will say this: we are in the top 5 as far as growth.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Any other questions or any questions regarding those items that we review every month? We'll move on to item C. Ms. McKinney, could you kind of run us through what you've been working on?
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. Over the past couple of months, I've been really, really busy. I'm going to share some highlights with you, some areas that I've touched, just to give you an update. I've worked with the Animal Care Center. Great work that they're doing out there. So many animals, it's hard to concentrate without loving on them. But fiscally, their operations appear to be in good standing. We didn't find any issues or any obstacles pending them from doing their job at this time. Health and sanitation, been spending a little time with the department head and the workers also in that area. Some reporting issues that we're trying to work through. Most of them can be attributed to technology and getting Waste Management Company and our reports to reflect the same numbers. So we're trying to find solutions to that. I definitely think our new software would be a great, great help in that area. Jackson Parks and Recreation, been working with Christy Davis on a grant issue with Toyota. We are trying to gain approval to have that grant reallocated, and we're waiting on information from the grantor, hopefully this week, in regards on how to proceed with that issue. Purchasing, we continue to meet with department heads to assess and discuss the needs that they have, and also just working on improvements as we trend to a new overhaul system. Hopefully, in the beginning of the year, we'll see some changes. So we're meeting with the department heads. Wage and hour issues, been finding several issues in that area and addressing them as they occur. Currently, I am developing a wage and hour training for department heads that you should see rolling out real soon, so that we'll be ready to go the beginning of the year, January 1, and have no compliance issues there. I've also started working with Mr. Franklin and his staff at JTA on compliance issues and going through codes and charter issues and ensuring that they are in compliance and working with plans of corrective actions there to get them where they should be.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. McKinney? One of the things we've talked about at the council work sessions, just kind of share before we move on, we're putting together a group to go through our municipal code and ordinances, and I'm working mentally to try to get a systematic way to go through that and look to make sure that we're aligned from a compliance standpoint with what's in the code and what's actually happening in these departments or subcomponents of the city. And so that's going to be a longer-term process, but I'll be reporting on that as we kind of go through, since those things kind of intersect with our audit committee functions. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. If you got something else, I gotta find the email.
And so, you know, that's one thing. As I go through, for some strange reason, I enjoy reading all that stuff. But as I go through it and as I understand better the operations of these departments within the city, there's things that pop up that we need to make sure that we're doing. And they're more for the public to be able to make sure that we've got proper oversight set in place from the mayors to the council down through these departments and subcomponents. So we'll be working on that. You're familiar with me requesting the budgets from and approving the budgets from your entity, and so we're taking a broad approach to that and just trying to get everybody in line moving forward. Any questions on anything under information?
Yeah, so I was gonna touch on Animal Care Center. Whitney sent me an email yesterday. They have 8 full-time employees and they have 1 part-time. She was asking to they can't get the part-time position filled, and because of lack of benefits and hours, so she was asking to bring it online as a full-time. It'd be $22,000, so I told her, I said, yes, I'll approve that to send it to Budget Committee for a budget amendment if you get me projection on operation costs for the new facility.
Yeah.
But real quick, she said that with they're operating the current staff they had 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they were handling 600 animals a year. That's it. Now they're handling and dealing with 1,300 plus animals a year. They're doing social outreach, fundraising, social media, volunteer orientation, childhood education programs, in addition to more than doubling the number of animals they have coming in and out of there. So they're rocking and rolling. She's gonna work on the cost and try to nail down the variable cost on the HVAC units and the different layout of the building. But working on that, see what it will cost once we open that back up. And
Yeah, and that's great. One of the things that I had discussed with her predecessor, coming in was making sure that, trying to look at those metrics. If they're doing 1,300 animals, they've doubled the capacity over there. And if I know their budget has increased, from year to year, but, the way that I was looking at it was how much are we spending really per animal, just trying to get a metric on that. And it looks like we're improving that ratio.
oh, dramatic.
And so, that was a fear of mine moving into that new facility, is if we're not improving that ratio and we're taking on additional costs, then that number could actually, go, in the opposite direction, so. it's good.
She's done a lot of operational changes. I mean, she actually now works with the rescues to get them fostered out, to get them out. I told her when she took over in, whenever it was, April of 2020, that by January 1 of this year, I want to be open intake, and that's what they've got to, is open intake, where they're moving the animals quick enough to where they're not having to turn any animals away if they're getting dropped off.
Okay. So I guess we look at that next month.
Yeah, when she gets it to me, then,
Yeah,
yeah, and
okay.
so we'll get the budget amendment for next month for that position, contingent on she gets me that projected operational cost.
Any other questions, comments? Moving on to business, zoning ordinance rewrite, budget ordinance. I think we're gonna have something come before the council. Just wanted to have some general discussion about that. Bobby, could you run us through that?
Very quickly, from what I know about this amendment, I know the mayor's been involved in this discussion as well, but if you go back to 16 or 17?
15, 16, yeah, something like that, yeah.
The last time the city master plan was updated, that plan was updated and developed, and part of that plan, the intention was to evaluate and, once the plan was complete, and identify and rewrite any planning ordinances so that it would kind of support the plan that was developed. And I think the decision was made back at that time to kind of defer that to the new administration. So there was a balance remaining on that contract. Some work was done in that regard from what I understand and billed and paid for, but there's about $77,251 remaining on that contract
Okay.
to complete that work. And I think the planning department has requested to move forward with that, particularly given, the current business environment and everything. It seems
Sure.
wise to do that. So that's what the amendment will total, $77,251.
Andrew and I were both on that committee. I was talking to the mayor this morning. I recall that we had a draft at some point. Yeah, and so that's what I was gonna, to see if we could get a hold of the draft before we.
Was it, was it a master draft of what was proposed to be changed in the zoning ordinance? Is that what it was?
We were never provided it. I
That was
think-
what it was supposed to be?
Yeah, it was like a draft of what the new zoning ordinance could look like, and that we were never able to get our hands on it to look at it, and there was this remaining 77,000 was to finish for. So if we've got work that's been completed, that was gonna be my question is, what was the contract originally for in its totality? Because this was a different group from the group that did the master plan, or was it the same group?
Same group.
Same group, okay.
Same group. Yeah, I'm not, I can go back and research that.
Okay.
Scott, you might remember, I
No,
don't
I was
recall.
trying to think. I know it was, I know the budget was 125 for 2 years. I think it's 250 altogether.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
I do know in talking with Stan Pilot that what you're describing is accurate. There was a degree of work done on the redrafting of the zoning ordinances to support the plan. Now, whether it ever got to the point of like a draft document,
Yeah,
I'm not sure of that, but there was work done and it was halted at this point.
I think it would behoove us to kind of go back, look at what was done, where were they heading, as we go into finalizing this contract, to make sure that we're still in alignment. I mean, a lot of things have changed,
Yeah,
a lot
no,
of new
yeah.
stuff's coming on.
We don't need to just pick up where we left off.
Right, I think there's a lot of, stuff to consider with Ford and Great Wolf.
Yeah,
and
I
other
think
potentials.
I look at this like utilizing the existing finalization of the contract to start another process of looking at a master plan to update it because our needs have drastically changed from 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And they're gonna continue to change, and, you know, what Jackson looks like in 10 years is gonna be, I don't even know that we can imagine it right now. So we have to create a master plan to help that, especially with a lot of the infilling that we have, it's gonna have to go on with residential. So I think, I look at that as kind of a starting point to look at where we are now, so we're not piecemealing some zoning ordinance together. And then we can move into kind of develop a plan to get the plan, develop a plan going forward, so we can look at that 2.0 master plan. I don't even know, I haven't gotten in far into it, just thinking about it or talking with plan or anybody to know if we need to have our existing master plan updated, or we just need to do another one, because I don't know. I haven't gotten far enough in
Yeah.
the conversation to go that route.
There was a, and you can probably recall this, in my opinion, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in that.
Yeah.
That's still out there for us to take on. And so, you know, I think a good review and maybe prioritization again. And it may be just updating that matrix in some new areas.
Yeah,
Right.
it may be as simple as doing that, but it may be something that we say, you know, needs here and here have changed, we change it here and there.
Right.
I don't know, I haven't gotten that far into it yet.
Okay. Any comments on the zoning ordinance rewrite? So I'll get a hold of Stan too and just see where we are on that draft, and if there is one, and what that looks like, and make sure we're not going down that path.
Yeah.
Moving on to item B, we're getting prepared for budget season starting in January. We've got our budget calendar. This is last year's budget calendar. One of the things, Mr. Arnold, I'd appreciate your assistance in is working to establish some new dates for the next year, that we can use to track our progress.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. Just a couple of comments. You know, we're in a better spot now, moving into this new budget year than we've been the past couple of years. The budget calendar, you know, is gonna be January to June. I mean, that is the calendar, and fortunately, we have this meeting and council meetings and agenda meetings that really take place every month on a regularly scheduled basis, right? So really, there's kind of 3 or 4 in my view, and I will be happy to put some dates on these kind of things, but there's really, I would say, 3 or 4 kind of topics that we might want to consider, kind of specific to the dates and the timing, right? One might be if there's interest in having a council planning or goal-setting session. So, you know, you would obviously, we would want to do that early, right? You know, early in the process. Somewhat related to that is, you know, the council has a history, and it's a good process, and we made some improvements in it last year, but when would we want to have what historically has been called the budget hearings, where department directors that are identified have the opportunity to speak to the council. So kind of when would we want to do that? That would be the second thing. So the kind of the council planning, you know, when would we want to do that? When would we want to have the department budget hearings? A couple other kind of things that are, well, one thing is kind of running parallel to all of this. I know it's on the agenda. I don't want to get ahead of you, but the ARPA funding and decisions related to that, and how that runs parallel with the budget and impacts the budget. And then the final thing, it's too early to really talk about or speculate, you know, any consideration of a debt issue or anything like that. But as we entertain that, if there's any appetite or need to consider that, you know, that decision is better to be made earlier in the process than later, if the goal would be to have something in place at the beginning of the fiscal year. So I would just say those 4 or 5 things, decisions about where they fit, and then we'll just kind of drop that in with the you know, the regular monthly meetings you know, that we have, and, you know, we'll publish a calendar and kind of let the department directors know. They're already thinking and talking about their budgets for next year already. I've had some discussions with some of them already.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of brings me, your first point, that council goal session, goal-setting session. You know, as I think about all the plans that these different departments put together, be it planning or Parks and Rec, or, you know, we're going through all these plans, there needs to be a point in which all that comes together, and we really sit down and say, okay, we've mapped out all these sidewalks that we need to build, and all these bike roads, bike lanes we need to build. How do we budget to get that done? You know, Parks and Rec, they've got a master plan they've been sitting on for a couple of years. You know, are we gonna invest, and where are we gonna invest? And really start, that was kind of my email I sent to you the other day. How do we start to formulate all that, bring it into one plan?
Yeah, we talked about that, especially that Parks Master Plan, we have to revisit that, because that was done, looking back, in my opinion, just so they can have the master plan, because a lot of the TDEC grants and a lot of the park grants require plans. I think they just kind of put a
It
plan
was like
together.
a check-a-box deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, if there are plans that we need to update or modify, that we talked about the civic master plan, you know, and this is a working, you know, this is
Yeah.
something we're building on. And
And some of those, like the Parks Plan, has to be a separate plan from the master plan to get the grant funding, which doesn't make much sense to me,
but as we move forward through the months, through the years, you know, starting to develop a process where we're looking at all the plans, because we spend a lot of money as a city developing these plans out.
and that may be probably the best use of updating the master plan 2.0, of bringing those plans into that one plan.
Yeah.
To where they're just the supporting plans, where they still have their own standalone plans, so when they're going for a grant in the Parks Department, they can do that, but it's still all together in a master plan. That may be the best way to update it.
That's where, as a council, as the mayor's office, we can all work together and say, okay, here are the things that we need to plan for. How do we prioritize those? How do we fund those? What are our financial goals and objectives too? And how do those financial goals align with the goal or wish lists or wants, you know, to knock out in this fiscal year?
In support of what, and I know we had this discussion the other day, but kind of in support of the point you guys are making there is really, in my view, what we need to do is, actually, the planning process needs to be outside of the budget cycle.
Right.
We should be planning year-round, and, you know, but we don't need to be incorporating, moving forward, you know, the
Right.
planning session into the budget work session. You know, you do a plan and you set priorities, and the budget is how to fund it, right?
That's right.
So, but we've made a lot of progress in all this the last couple of years. Well, I think we're in a much better spot than we were a couple of years ago, but the planning piece and kind of segregating that from the budget cycle is
Yeah.
what we need to do.
I'd agree. And
Yeah.
I think that these goals and objective sessions is really, you know, it's gonna be hard to do it this year, but next year, like setting a goal to say, okay, we've got all this stuff consolidated. What out of these planning things do we need to take care of in this year or next year? It can inform our capital plan that we'll talk about in a second. You know, all that stuff is intertwined and ties together. And to try to segment it out and do, you know, one meeting to decide that really isn't feasible. It's gonna take a year long, you know, throughout the year, constantly approaching it and revisiting it. Any other questions on that budget calendar? So, Mr. Arnold, if you could
Yeah, we'll be
kind of go through and give us some updates, and these are just target dates for us to kind of make sure that we're staying on pace for the budget. Moving on to item C, 5-year capital plan update. All this is intertwined. Last year, I think we tried to do that in February, but I think we ended up getting it like kind of late. I'm trying to remember.
Well, I think we go back to, we get intertwined with item D is where we're still at with the intertwined of that 5-year
Right.
capital plan, because we started out with the 5-year plan, and then we got wind that we were gonna get American Rescue Plan funds. And so we shifted the 5-year plan and moved it around to a bare bones capital plan. to just get through, so we wouldn't have to do any debt issue, waiting on that. And then here we are in November, still haven't got final guidance on it yet. So so the 5-year plan was established, and my office moved some stuff around to know what we could pay for, what we could afford without borrowing, out issuing any debt, anticipating these funds. And then now we're here trying to move those things around again, because we still have, I was gonna talk about too, kind of with that American Rescue Plan, we have state American Rescue Plan funds. They're going to water, broadband, stormwater. We don't know the distribution yet. Initially, they were gonna send it to counties to sub out to municipalities and utility districts. I've talked with several county mayors that say they just don't wanna do that, they don't have any water systems, they don't do that. It's maybe a little bit of stormwater, but it just doesn't make sense for them. So we've got our lobbyists working on that. I've talked with TDEC, talked with Representative Todd yesterday about it. And then we have still not fully clear on the new infrastructure bill, what has come out and what's gonna be available for municipalities and local governments. So that affects the 5-year capital plan, because that's also not gonna be like ARPA. I mean, it's gonna be I think over 5 years of those monies coming out. And then, we have, Build Back Better is also part of it, and that has infrastructure pieces in it as well. And so it's difficult, because you don't want to leave money on the table. We don't want to spend money that we could get the grants from, but having to plan for this when it seems like the goalpost keeps getting moved on, when we can expect finalization of these things, is difficult.
To speak on the capital plan, from Bobby and I had a little discussion earlier this week, I think, I'm losing track of my days, but starting to develop an operating capital plan, and we did this, if you recall, when we took that on the first year, the recurring things that we have.
So we gotta get every year, the vest,
The body
yeah, all
cameras,
that stuff.
turnout suits, all those things, even vehicle replacement, what are those operating capital that we know we're gonna need? And that's something that we figure out how to do that without a debt issue.
Bobby, you had any more conversation with Mary from Enterprise?
I've talked to her, or she tries to talk to me at least 3 times a week. We are scheduling a meeting though, and I've looked at her proposal.
Uh-huh.
A lot of cities, counties, organizations that have as many vehicles as we do have some type of formal fleet management policy and leasing options, and it's not piecemeal like we tend to do here. So I think her proposal, or their enterprise's proposal, needs to be vetted very thoroughly, but that concept is important, and I think makes a lot of sense, actually. So,
Yeah, I think they do everything but the large vehicles. They don't do like construction vehicles
That's
and
right.
fire trucks. They do everything else.
That's correct, yeah.
1.5 ton and under, maybe, I think.
So,
But that plan being kind of separate and independent from our infrastructure special capital planning. Especially as we move into these years where we're gonna have this debt service drop off, and we're gonna have more opportunities for special and capital planning,
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I would just say, the way, from a textbook standpoint, you need to be paying for things as you use it, right? So, we don't really need to be in a situation where we're financing, vehicles that last 5 years, and we're doing a bond issue to pay for
Right.
those kind of, that kind of concept. And, in building projects and infrastructure projects that, have a useful life, sometimes the debt issue makes sense for those if interest rates are attractive, and you want to pay for that over the life of the asset. So, but we do need to be moving away from financing with debt, if we can, operating, what we're calling operating capital. And we might need to revisit our capitalization policy. That's kind of a technicality. Right now, we capitalize assets that are $5,000 or more and have a useful life of 2 years or more, but a lot of times you have like items. There's just a lot of detail that you need to look at, so.
Okay. Any other comments on capital planning? So, that's something that we need to pick up and continue to work through and maybe subdivide this year, is looking at what those operating, I know the police department's reached out to me a couple times with some items, and just making sure that we're able to provide those operating capital needs.
Yeah.
Item D, American Rescue Plan, kind of touched on this. We've, the mayor, Bobby, and myself, been meeting on this almost weekly for the last couple of weeks. Still, I feel like a broken record at this point. Still waiting on that final guidance. Going through some exercises and aligning some of our, what we feel is like by definition, and what are some things that may fit in those holes, but there's still questions that need to be answered. And so, I don't know if you want to provide any other comment on it.
I think Lauren's working on a resolution, general resolution, preliminary resolution, so that we can start looking at moving some of these dollars that we know fit. I mean, even if we say we're gonna spend all of it today, we know the supply line's gonna make it 6-8 months before we can get stuff done. So, we're still waiting on playground equipment that we ordered back in May or June, so, but getting those in large buckets and kind of a preliminary resolution, knowing that when final guidance comes out, some things may change, needs may change, depending on what these other funding buckets that come down do, and then start creating a more immediate plan to utilize the funds that we need for the emergent needs that we have, based on how we can spend the dollars.
Yeah, so we got another meeting on that this week.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can move the ball a little bit further down the field. But that's one of those components, we've got the budget, we've got the capital budget, we've got the ARP budget, we're about to add the infrastructure budget. All this stuff, is gonna need to be planned, make sure that we're investing in the right places. And we're taking advantage of those federal funds where we can take advantage of them. Trying to think, Bobby, there was one other thing I was gonna ask you. Oh, could you give us just a quick update on the external audit, where they're at? And we kind of spoke a little bit the other day, if you wouldn't mind updating the group on
Okay.
when we could maybe expect a report.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Of course, we have a new audit firm this year for the first time in, 10 or 12 years? Been a while. They're a very good firm. Malden and Jenkins would be their name. Their main offices are in Atlanta. The Chattanooga office happens to be assigned our audit. They do a lot of work in Tennessee. They've been on site, some combination of people, maybe 3 times. So far, we're kind of at the crunch time right now. The audit has to be published and filed with the comptroller's office by the end of December. Had a discussion with the partner in charge of our audit the other day. They're planning and they're scheduling for, while the audit itself will be published and filed with the comptroller's office by the end of December, they're planning on a January, February timeline to report out to the audit committee and the council, something similar to what we've had in the past. I will tell you, to no one's real surprise, when you've been with one audit firm, and ATA did a great job, they did it over a number of years, but the better way to say that is when you have a new audit firm, really, there's a process that you have to go through for the new audit firm. They do a lot of work, and they're doing a lot of work, and they're asking for lots and lots of stuff. And I'm not aware of any material problems or any concerns about the presentation of the financial statements and that type of thing. They've not shared anything with me to indicate that they've got any concern about those types of items. Process-wise, though, and things that maybe the city should have been doing, we might need, recommendations for things we need to be doing moving forward. Frankly, there's some things that they have required of the city through the audit process this year that historically that we've not had to provide or perform certain things in preparation. So it's gone smoothly, but it's a lot of work. And, you know, I don't think there's any surprises there. I think they anticipated that and we anticipated that as well. So, and I think it's going well. I think we're on target to it seems like the request that we get from the auditors and the questions and the request for information it's slowing down at a rapid pace, thank goodness. So that's a good sign, I think. And so I'm confident we'll get them what they need for them to publish their report before the end of December, like is required with the comptroller's office. And then they'll plan to report out, you know, to the audit committee and the council in January, February, whatever. And I think that we'll be in a lot better position, and they will as well for the second year audit that they'll be doing with it. So that's kind of where it is. So,
Okay.
is that
Yeah, thank you, I
pretty-
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other business we need to consider today? Want to introduce Mr. Fancher Sargent. He's going to come on to the committee, I'm assuming. If he hasn't, he hadn't gotten up and walked out.
He ain't got walked out for y'all vote for him.
And so, I don't know, do we have to vote to, I think you
No, the
just.
council does.
The council votes, that's right. So he'll be on our agenda, this coming, yeah, hey, I know, I didn't remember that either. This coming month, and so I just want to thank you for coming and getting an overview of this, and we appreciate you coming on board.
Yeah, felt like you asked me in on the easy meeting here.
Yeah, well, and what we've, you know, one of the goals that we set out when we established this and when the audit, as I was telling you before the meeting, when we took on these audit committee duties, was to get someone with experience like yourself to come on and help advise us on some of these compliance things that pop up and help us navigate that with your expertise. And so we appreciate you coming on and being a part of this. Anything else today? Again, appreciate everybody's time, and if you got any questions, shoot me an email. And we're looking for the second Thursday of December, making sure that doesn't conflict with anything while I check this. That's pretty quick. We actually, let's look at the 16th of December. That'd be, yeah, 16th. And Sandy, if you could send an email, just so we get it on everybody's calendar. All right, if there's no other business, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, guys.